Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike McLeod. I'm not used to such normal, unbelievable fanfare as the Olympic theme, but we felt it fit the mood today. So I'm the Director of Member and Business Development for the British Columbia Hotel Association, and I'd like to welcome you to the June edition of our BCHA virtual event series. We are absolutely thrilled to be joined today by the BC 2030 Feasibility Project team, who are going to share further details on the plans for the bid for the BC 2030 Olympic and Paralympic Games. We're going to provide information on the next steps in the process and how you all as our industry partners can participate. The Olympic Games returning to BC would present an enormous opportunity for our accommodation and tourism sector, bringing attention to our province on the world stage and keeping us competitive for decades to come. We are very grateful to the committee for joining us today to share details on this exciting opportunity. Before we begin, though, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from our BCHA office located on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, which has been stewarded by them since time immemorial. We also would like to acknowledge our sponsor today. So without the gracious efforts of and support of our sponsors, we can't bring these sessions to you. So today we're sponsored by Peninsula. Peninsula is a leader in providing HR support, including occupational health and safety, compliance, and employee management. With Peninsula, employers will experience what it's like to have an in-house HR department and employment law specialist, without the added expense of hiring additional employees. From over-the-phone advice to on-site support, Peninsula offers the help you need. We encourage you to learn more about Peninsula should you be looking for HR support. Thank you very much to Katrina and their team for joining us today. And you can find out more information by visiting peninsula.com or visiting the bcha.com website for more information, or connecting with our member services team. And now it's my pleasure here to introduce our committee and our panelists for today. First up is the President of the Canadian Olympic Committee, Tricia Smith. Vice President, International Relations and Public Affairs, Andrew Baker. Indigenous Inclusion and Partnerships, Tawani Joseph. The Community Engagement of the 2030 Feasibility Team, Chief Lara Musel. And finally, Impact and Legacy Chair of the 2030 Feasibility Team, Mary Conabare. I'll turn it over to our panelists for the presentation, and we'll be back for questions and answers after the presentation. Please use the Q&A function located in the Zoom below for your questions. Team, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. I don't see myself, but as there we go. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. A little technical detail there. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today about this exciting project and really building on the success of the 2010 Games and bringing the Games back to BC in 2030 with an Indigenous-led bid, daring to dream again. So I'm joining you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Lil'wat, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and Squamish nations, rather. And as you know, in 2010, groundbreaking work was done in partnership with the four host First Nations, Lil'wat, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. But a lot has happened since then. A lot has happened since 2010. The Truth and Reconciliation Report, the province's commitment to DRIPA, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People brought into law by the federal government, and the recent tragic findings of the graves of the children who didn't come home from the residential schools. Importantly, the Truth and Reconciliation Report recognizes the importance of sport in reconciliation and the power of sport to bring people together to make change. And there are some specific calls to action around sport and hosting games. So when the Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Paralympic Committee were looking at a possible future hosting of the Games, We also are committed to those calls to action, specifically calls to action 91, which talks about respecting protocol, respecting lands, and engagement in all stages of hosting a games. So last summer, we started looking at working on a technical feasibility study of a possible 2030 games in BC. And following protocol, we spoke to Tawny Joseph, who's CEO of the Forehouse First Nations in 2010. And he told us that protocol would be to first ask permission of the Lil'wat, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations, as they're the nations on whose territory the 2010 venues sit, permission to do the work. When we did that, we received their permission, and we also learned that the four nations were in the process of inviting the City of Vancouver and the Resort Municipality of Whistler to sign an MOU to explore 2030 games. So we said, fantastic, let's work together. And the nations invited us then to work with them. We started the technical feasibility work. The MOU was signed in December of last year, and we signed the collaboration agreement with the four nations the following month. We then merged the technical work and moved forward under a leadership assembly, the leadership assembly, to do this work together. This is so meaningful. This will be the first Indigenous-led Olympic bid. Many people ask me what that means, and I can tell you from being in the process that it means a process that's respectful, inclusive, and community building. The leadership comes to the table as equals, each bringing their expertise. Obviously, ours is sport, and we're working for an exceptional games that will ensure a positive and inclusive future for this country. It'll raise us all up. Internationally, we presented our concept to the IOC, and it's been very well received. They're very supportive of the Indigenous-led bid, excited about this message and the vision. There are other candidates. Salt Lake City has a strong candidacy, as does Sapporo, and there's a bid possibly from Spain. But we believe ours is a very strong bid and fits the IOC goals, including sustainability and changing the world through sport. I'll now pass to our team to tell you more about this exciting project.
Thank you, Tricia, and thank you for opening us up in a good way. And when we talk about an Indigenous-led process, it's really about the coming together. And think about our longhouse. When we conduct our traditional work and ceremony, we invite people from various places to come and witness the traditional work that's taking place, from naming ceremonies to weddings to others. And the important part is when people are asked to come into our longhouse, we open it up to the ancestors, and it's through the power of an invitation that people come together. But the responsibility is to hear the messages that are shared that day, go back to where they're from and their homes, talk to their family and friends, and share those messages of what happened on that day. And what's important about today, and what's important about the work that we've embarked upon, is that it's a responsibility now for us to share the teachings and the languages and the things that we're doing and working on through the power of an invitation. And also what's important is that by working together with the groups that Tricia had identified earlier through the Leadership Council, Resort Municipality of Whistler, City of Vancouver, Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Lil'wat, Canadian Olympic Committee, Canadian Paralympic Committee, as we've embarked upon this work, what we've learned is that we have so much in common. And when we talk about Indigenous-led, it's really about all. It's about collaboration at the same place, at the same table, coming together. And what has really come through strongly is that we should come together with one heart and one mind. When we think 7 generations ahead, it's important. But also when we talk about reconciliation, and thank you, Tricia, for mentioning those things that within our communities, but also the important legislation and the truth and reconciliation recommendations, is that we're focusing on what we have in common. And as we start to move forward, we will move forward with one heart and one mind. And we want to extend that invitation to all of you today to come join with us. Next slide. Also, when we talk about the rim of the artwork here, it's the eye of the creator. The eye of the creator looks down upon all of us and our ancestors and the work that we're doing, and ensuring that we're moving forward from the teachings from where we've all come from no matter which culture we're from, and share those teachings that we have together. And practicing protocol was the first thing that Tricia had mentioned earlier. It's seeking permission. And also what was important, it's a value-based approach, human values. Teachings in our communities are really about human values, about wanting family to do well, working together, holding each other up, lifting each other up. And then also looking at a process. when we talk about free and informed prior consent engagement and working with Indigenous communities through the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but also through TRC recommendations are important. And so the communities, the nations have stepped up and said, we would like to do this work. And those nations, the Forest First Nations, have reached out to other nations where there potentially could be venues and are practicing this protocol that we're talking about right now. Then also looking at together. When we talk about Indigenous-led, it's really about collaboration and coordination, commitment and communication. And that's really the process that we've been working on over the last number of months. And now we want to extend that out to all of you today to join us in this collaboration and working together. Then, of course, looking at it from a timeline perspective. We do have some timelines which you hear about today, but also at the same time, this engagement process that we've embarked upon, we need to hear your voices, but also citizens here in British Columbia and Canada, members within the communities, of why this could be important for all of us as we move forward, thinking about how a project like this could truly be a model for reconciliation, which touches upon economic reconciliation, around education, around culture, around languages and others. Next slide. And now I'd like to turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Twani. A pleasure to be here with everyone today and to be presenting part of this presentation. I'm coming to you today from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and it's been an honor to be working on this project on those territories, in addition to the traditional unceded territories of the Lil'wat Nation. As Tricia covered, this process really officially started with the signing of an MOU between the 4 host nations, the City of Vancouver, and the Resort Municipality of Whistler, followed by a collaboration agreement with the Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Paralympic Committee in late January, early February. And we've been really assessing feasibility, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But then in addition to assessing the feasibility of a potential 2030 Games, we were also in the midst of developing an initial hosting concept, which informs the phase that we are just launching into this week and this month, in terms of the initial hosting concept and engaging around the vision, the concept for these games. And we look forward to sharing more with you about that today, and then hearing your feedback and having ongoing engagement. We believe so much that it is important to have two-way dialogue throughout this process. And you'll hear a little bit from Lara later about how we will intend to do that over the course of the project. When we talk about that engagement phase, really it's with the public, but it's also with all of the different partners. And we'll be looking in the coming months to look locally at endorsements from the local partners to continue to proceed, to continue to engage and pursue the project. And then with the senior levels of government over the course of the fall. Should all partners wish to decide that we'd like to proceed and proceed into an international bidding phase, we would seek to be invited into a targeted dialogue phase with the International Olympic Committee. And I'll talk on the next slide about the differences in these processes, but they're significant. And that phase would look to start in December. This was recently communicated by the International Olympic Committee at their most recent session, where they also confirmed that they would be intending, and they believe that they would be in a position to award the Games at their next session in 2023, which is scheduled to start on May 30th in Mumbai. So when we look at what's changed, when I summarize this slide really in everything. Everything has changed. Everything is different about the way that this process is unfolding. And when we look at the local bidding model, the invite from the 4 host nations to the partners to come to the table, to have a discussion and to explore an opportunity, that is all new. It's brand new. And the Canadian Olympic Committee ourselves, we had a question come in around, is BC the only candidate in Canada? Or is the COC looking? And as Tricia mentioned, we started to do an analysis several years ago about the different opportunities, but also build a business plan for our investment and our support. And so this is a privately funded feasibility effort, privately funded bid effort through the Canadian Olympic Committee in support of and under the leadership of the 4 host nations. And that's a first for us as well. And so the local model is completely different than it would have been when we looked at doing this in 2010, or even at different events that have arisen since. And then in Canada, there's a sport hosting policy that was unveiled in 2008, and a major sport events framework that was unveiled in conjunction with provincial partners and major sport franchise holders. That really sets a policy for Canada hosting sporting events and provides a rationale for for why major sport events are unique in their ability to drive impact and legacy, which Mary will talk about. And it states that Canada should seek to pursue hosting of major sporting events 2 every 10 years. And what do you know? These games would fit right into that policy at the federal level, and we think that there's a great opportunity within the policy to drive immense benefit here in BC. And then when we look internationally, the IOC has a new framework for both bidding for the games and for hosting the games. And the bid process is completely different. Gone are the days of the envelope that you may remember, and a process that resulted in one winner and multiple losers. The process is aimed at increasing accessibility, at allowing regions and jurisdictions to come together, for local partners to come together to discuss the opportunity at a lower cost in a more accessible way. And the IOC is there to provide feedback and guidance throughout the process in what they call a continuous dialogue phase, which we entered following the signature of the collaboration agreement in February. And then once bids locally are ready, when the IOC feels they're ready, when local potential bids have progressed to a spot where they're ready to explore a specific year, namely 2030 in this case, they would look to be invited into a targeted dialogue that's very specific to the awarding of those games. And so that is, on the previous slide, what you would have seen us refer to as the international bidding phase in December. And so we believe that there's a great opportunity. Maybe there's an opportunity to look at that international invite. So this is an amazing opportunity for us. The norms for hosting the games, the essence of it is that the games should adapt to the host communities, and that's unlocked a number of different elements that allow us to get creative and be flexible in how we deliver these games, and have been integrated into this initial hosting concept. So with that, we look forward to giving you more information, and I'll pass to Mary Conner. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew, very much. So I'll walk you through at the high level the initial hosting concept, and then we'll wrap up and take some questions after Laura has talked about engagement. The venue master plan is really the footprint. Where do these venues, where are they located? Where do the sport events take place? The villages, things like that. And so Tim Gaeta, who is our lead for Venue Master Plan, who couldn't make it here today, he ran a process that looked right across the province and said, where are the locations that meet the technical requirements? But he had a series of principles that he worked towards. And the first one is, what's the concept that is the most fiscally and environmentally responsible? And so that means building off of 2010 legacies for venues. And where we did go elsewhere, how does it fit in, as Andrew just said, to the needs of the community, to priorities that already exist? We also keep the field of play. We have to deliver a quality event. And there's something magical, honestly, about a multi-sport event like this. This is why Canada and the province wants to host events, because it's more than a collection of individual competitions. But when they all come together, there's a transformational aspect that we saw in 2010. The village concepts, of course, we need villages for the athletes and team officials close to each of the locations that we'll talk about in a minute. And especially for this group, I want to spend some time on accommodation. So when we look at game stakeholders, there's about 24,000 beds that we need for the Olympic Games and 4,000 for the Paralympic Games. And so we have the inventory, but we have to look quite broadly. So right from Chilliwack to Pemberton, and you'll see in a minute, right from Kamloops to Sun Peaks. And so there's been a lot of work led by Tim and Marion Harper Truskin, sorry, I wanted to get her name right. And Marion will be sending out a proposal to all the properties, hotel properties in those areas, to look at what does this mean and how would this work for the games. And so in addition to those numbers that I just gave you, we also will need accommodation for workforce and security and other sort of suppliers to the games. So a lot of accommodation, and we're relying on the Hotel Association and TIA BC for that. So if we look at the map, it's very small. So I'm just going to talk very broadly. When we did all the feasibility work that I talked about, that Tim did, and looked across the province, it fell naturally into 3 circles. And the circle is a sacred symbol in Indigenous cultures. It's one of unity, of balance, of reciprocity, equality at the table. And so if I just talk at a high level, we have the one on the far left, which is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Lil'wat and Squamish nations in Whistler. We have a circle in the Vancouver and the Lower Mainland on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And then a new circle around Sun Peaks and Kamloops on the traditional and unceded territories of the Adams Lake, Little Shuswap Lake, Niskonluth Indian bands, and then a support community Kamloops, in particular, on the traditional territories of Kamloops to Secwepemc. So I'm going to just walk you through a couple of the differences here. So Whistler will look very similar because it was such a great event in 2010. So we have alpine, Nordic, and sliding sports. And during the Paralympics, we'll have all the Paralympic snow sports, if you will. So alpine and Nordic sports up there, and snowboard. If we go to the next slide, there's a lot of words on this, so I'm not going to walk you through it. I just want to highlight two concepts. So I talked about Sun Peaks. Sun Peaks will have freestyle and snowboard and all the events that go as part of that. And if you think it's what was done at Cypress, and you can imagine if we look ahead or look back rather to 2010, look at what snow looked like this winter and then look ahead another 8 years. We just want to be sure that we have a very environmentally sustainable. So rather than relying on man-made snow, really looking at natural snow. The one concept that is quite different is around Hastings Park in Vancouver. And for those of you, I saw that nobody chose figure skating on what sport they wanted to do. But if you did want to do that, it would be at Hastings Park. And so Hastings Park in 2010 had figure skating and short track, but we have the ability to really create quite an exciting and interactive concept there. And so think of the PNE or an expo or Epcot Center or something like that. And so we have the freestyle, we have figure skating and short track, we have curling during the Paralympic Games, wheelchair curling, and we can put big air. And I don't know if any of you watched that during the Beijing Games, but it's this giant ramp and everyone tricks out all these sort of exceptional jumps. And so you can do that often, it's often done, in fact, on temporary ramps. And so we can do it on the race course and allow for sort of a crowd of 20,000 people to really do a bit of a rock show. It's quite a sexy event. Also, we can use the refrigeration structure that would refrigerate that ramp to create a community skating rink during the games and have the community interact and really take part of that. The other thing that Hastings Park allows us to do, the city will have built a 10,000 seat amphitheater. So we can have the Meadows Plazas at night, we can have live programming at a live site in the day. There's open space for a cultural village, and there's room to have an Olympic and Paralympic merchandise superstore there. So a lot, really make it quite a destination circle. So, and then there's a lot of major non-competition events. These are things like the Broadcast Center, even the Olympic and Paralympic family hotels, where there's a hotel where all the members of the IOC and the IPC stay. And then the villages are still being discussed. So if we move on to the next one, we talk about the Olympic movement as having three pillars, and it's sport, culture, and sustainability. So if we talked about the sport aspect, I want to talk about the culture aspect here. We have the opportunity to really infuse Indigenous teachings, Indigenous ways of knowing, ways of being, history throughout this entire concept, entire experience of the Games. So we brought together the cultural chiefs of the nations and cultural reps from municipalities, cultural staff from the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic committees, and had some brainstorming. And so I talked about the cultural village at Hastings Park, but another idea was a cultural youth academy and bring Indigenous youth from across the country and elders and do streams of learning. It could be dance or music or cooking. It could be entrepreneurship. It could be language, teaching and revitalizing languages, and having them learn from each other. And the idea is invite non-Indigenous youth to learn with Indigenous youth from the elders. And of course, we have 6 years where we have education that we can do and really take advantage of Andrew talked about truth, and Tricia, truth and reconciliation. So what's the history? What's the history of Indigenous athletes? What's the history of traditional sport and how that shapes sport in Canada? The third pillar is sustainability, and this is quite different from the past. So whereas in 2010, we were carbon neutral, so we had to reduce the footprint as much as possible and offset what we couldn't reduce. This is the first games where the International Olympic Committee is requiring that they be climate positive. So we'll do that reduce offset footprint, but then leave behind positive initiatives that contribute positively to climate in the future. So think of technology that sucks carbon out of the air, or natural based solutions that do the same thing. So very important. Tuani talked about the 7th generation principle, and he just alluded to it. So that's another lens that we look at everything through, doing it the Indigenous way. So when we talk about Indigenous-led bid, it's looking back 7 generations of what can we learn from ancestors that inform today, and then having a lens of what is each action we do today or decision, and how does that impact 7 generations into the future. So that is all part of what we talk about. The last thing I'm going to say, and the last thing I'll say on the climate is the importance of it's a wider requirement than it has been, or more stringent rather requirement than it has been in the past. So it's not just about what the Games Committee does, but it's what is influenced by the Games and the life cycle of the products that go into the Games. So if you think of Coca-Cola being an international sponsor, it counts as footprint of what's the life cycle of the materials that go into a plant-based bottle, for instance. The next slide is quite beautiful, except that it's all black. So normally it's white and there's a lot of words on it. So no worries. I'll just talk a little bit about what's missing off this slide. We talked about the 3 pillars of Olympic and the Olympic movement rather. So I said it was sustainability, sport, and culture. And the first 3 that you can see there on the left really are sustainability broken into 3 different facets. So it's not just climate. Sustainability also talks about economic and social sustainability. The last 2 that you can see there are sport participation and culture. So I just talked about those. And then the middle one that's missing is community resilience and affordability. And it comes back to what Andrew said, is this is about how do we align the project? How do we achieve priorities that make our community stronger? So it's not about trying to adapt to the sport, but do it the other way around. There's a category right across the top that said reconciliation, and it really means that we're infusing that. There's not a 7th separate reconciliation. Reconciliation is at the heart of everything we do. And when it comes to impact and legacy, we plan for it. We don't try and just hope that it occurs at the end. We need all of us working together. It's not just on the organizing committee. And then we measure it. How do we know that we succeeded? So with that, let me pass it on to Laura Messel.
Thanks, Mary. Ace-Whale. Good day. Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Mussel-Savage. I'm Chief of Squaw First Nation and a member of the BC 2030 Project Feasibility team. And I'm going to speak to you about the community engagement component to this project. So as you heard earlier in the presentation, there was the power of an invitation that the nations had extended to the city of Vancouver, to the resort municipality of Whistler, and then the COC and the CPC as well, to come in and explore this possibility for 2030 Games. And we're now reaching a phase in the project where that invitation is now extended to all of you, to the communities and to the public, to now give feedback to the project, to the concept, the Games vision, to the legacies we would like to see left behind, and to build towards, thinking ahead to those several generations ahead of us while we respect and honor those 7 generations behind. So in this Indigenous-led process, we are guided by the values of community, respect, and inclusivity. And it is an Indigenous-led way to be having the dialogue with community, to be having the invitation to join the conversation and give that feedback. So as we enter into this engagement phase, just as this week, as we've unveiled the concept, we're inviting members of the communities to participate in engaging through a community engagement survey, through providing stories and memories from 2010, things that really resonated and impacted you with previous Games, on our website, as well as a number of community engagement events that will be held within the local region, beginning on June 21st, National Indigenous Peoples Day. There'll be an event in Vancouver. Dragon Boat Festival will have a pop-up event. So, and all of those dates and information is on our project website. So if we go to the next one, this is the important call to action that we'd like to leave with you today, is to take a moment to visit our site. We both have in both French and English, to take the survey, to share a story, to register your email so that you can be sure to receive project updates as we move forward. But we do also want to take an opportunity to answer any questions that you may have for us today as well. So really in calling you out for this invitation to engage with us on this project, provide your feedback, and let us know what you think so that we can help inform, shape, and refine the concept as we move forward. Never before has a project this early on asked communities and the public for their input. So we do really look forward to hearing from you in this process. And I'd just like to turn it back to Tawani Joseph for any closing remarks before we go to Q&A.
Thank you, Lara, and thank you, team. And really, this is the time that we need all of your voices to come forward with us, to stand with us in the spirit of reconciliation, but also know that it's important that as we stand together and move forward, this will truly be a model that we can look to together into making a better province, cities, and a better country. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, our esteemed panelists who have joined us. It's time now for the Q&A portion of this. And again, I'd just like to thank the group here for such a great presentation. It's very exciting, and there's lots of questions, and we had several questions submitted ahead of time. So we'll try to get to as many as we can here in the next 15 minutes or so that we have left. Just a reminder to those on the Zoom call here, please use the Q&A if you'd like to have your questions submitted, and we'll get it out to the group. And just for our panelists here, I will probably keep it fairly general, so feel free to, whomever wants to take a certain question, jump in and handle it, please. So the last part of the presentation was about engagement, public engagement, community engagement. So there's been several questions around how surrounding communities to sort of the major centers of this bid can participate. And most of it is generally around pre-event or pre-game events, training camps, those sorts of things. So maybe you could speak to maybe the various regions that are involved and what maybe some of the communities could expect in the years leading up to this.
I could start, and then maybe other members of the team can come in. So having attended many Olympic Games as an athlete and now as an official, what I've seen develop over the years is a real professionalism around preparing for the games. It's always been there, but to a level we haven't seen. And all the teams that come to the games, they come to the games ahead of time to have pre-games training camps. So that means the Swedish team will be, hockey team will be looking for a place to train, bring all their players. They'll want a place that has good hotel accommodation for the athletes, for all the support team around them. They'll want to have access to facilities. They love being in communities that have that are keen on sport, and so the community can come out and see some of their practices and cheer them on. So it's a really wonderful opportunity. I remember before Tokyo going to an event a couple of years out from the games, and I was in the Congress room. And to go out of the Congress room to the washroom, you had to go down this hall, and there were dozens and dozens of communities there saying, "Come to our community for your pre-games training camp," and they had it all laid out so that teams could choose what would be best for them. And it's not just hockey teams that are looking for places; it's the curlers and the downhill skiers and the freestyle skiers. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And what we'd like to do as an organizing group is to really make a menu of those so that it makes it easy for you to figure out what's best for you, and them to figure out what's best for them. And so there's some great opportunities there. So I don't know if Mary or Tawani, yep.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tricia. And also in the lead up to the games, not just for competitions that in the lead up to it and countries visiting to do training, but there are many, my experience leading up to 2010, it was many years out. There's many auxiliary events that happen, different visits, that happen. There's different conferences that get put on, but also there's visitors that come in from around the world that want to experience the province of British Columbia in different ways. So the ability for tourism to be able to tell the story, but also for the Hotel Association to know that people do come in and they want to experience different places. And that's why the importance of us working together, being able to share that with visitors coming as part of this story is so critical. But it does happen for many years in the lead up to the games itself. The games is kind of the pinnacle where you have athletes in town and everybody, but the years prior to that are also really important. I traveled all around this province personally for many different events and then all around the country as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for the responses there. We're going to keep in a similar vein with, again, these are some submitted questions from the registration process. But you guys did a great job outlining the communities that are involved in the bids. Currently, is there opportunity for this to expand perhaps to Vancouver Island or perhaps to involving other Indigenous groups around the province?
I can speak to that a bit. So there's, to Wani's point and to Tricia's, there's other events that could absolutely happen. And we want to have the entire province as part of the games and ultimately across the nation as well. And so one of the ideas is having a community hub on reserve network and having each community, First Nation community, welcome in people. It ties back to what Twani was saying in terms of Indigenous tourism. The other way is really just looking at the digital aspects of the games too, because we know that for environmental reasons that we're not going to shuttle the athletes around as much as normal. And so we want to make sure everybody is engaged, which means that if we've taken up all the hotel rooms in the Lower Mainland for the games needs, that people can stay elsewhere in the province and still experience the games. We met with a creative firm that had some really exciting and a little alarming, I have to say, ideas about how to virtually take part and use virtual reality. And so they could be anywhere in the province and still feel connected to the games.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, it's a good question. And so in the lead up to 2010, we actually had 90 partnerships with Indigenous groups across the country. And so that included relationships in every province and territory. So when we talk about British Columbia, we have just over 200 First Nations within British Columbia, but the relationships that have been created in the tourism industry over the last number of years will be at the forefront of this, because when we tell the stories of the lands that we all live on, there will be many opportunities for that to happen. And also part of the engagement project process that Chief Lara is leading for us, it will be engaging with many other Indigenous groups right across the province of BC. So the work that's I know has already been underway, that's going to be so paramount and critical in terms of even the Iconics program and others, but it's the relationships between First Nations tourism opportunities and the hotels that are close by to them. Those are all the opportunities I think that would be presenting themselves.
Yeah, and if I could just add, we heard from Rick Antonson yesterday at the Board of Trade event, and Rick is the former head of Tourism Vancouver. I'm sure a lot of you know him, and he talked about the effects of 2010 having been felt from the day the games were awarded in, was it 2003? So to years past 2010. So it really put Vancouver on the map as a destination and British Columbia on the map as a destination. And we really believe that telling this story, including really the rich history of this place, the Indigenous history, the art, the culture, and the uniqueness, will really take us to the next level of interest and then benefits to the region.
Terrific. Thanks, Tricia. And that'll lead into sort of my next series of questions here around legacy. So from the chat, I'm going to combine both of these questions, but what processes will be in place to ensure that businesses take the long view of these games? And then in companion with that, what about the sports side? What do we envision in, say, 2035, the legacy to be from these games?
I can speak to the first part, and then maybe Andrew, I'll pass it to you on the sports side. So the way it works with the hotel properties is that I mentioned Marion at Harper Truskin. So she's been working with different associations on basically what the proposal would be. And it protects both the public, but it also is it's a win-win for the hotel accommodation sector as well. And so the way it works is it allows the hotels to really benefit in every way from the games without really having a short-term view. And it's not thinking that the hotels would have a short-term view, but it really allows everyone to think of exactly what the comment in the chat said, make sure that it's really about quality of service and all the rest, and not about maybe a blip. And yet the formula allows for the hotels to have a win from this as well. So it's sort of guaranteed business, yeah.
Wonderful.
Then on the sports side, I mean, there's so many opportunities. I mean, at its core, the Olympic and Paralympic Games are a sporting event, and it's what brings us together. And we talk about the platform that it provides for a number of different things, but it also it acts as an impetus for conversations that may not otherwise happen. It gives a reason for people to come together, to plan intentionally, to coordinate, to align, and to look at an opportunity in an aligned fashion. And I think we saw this in 2010 across a number of different areas. And there's existing and lasting legacies coming out of 10 and the relationships that exist between partners that just didn't exist before. And so I think as we think past 2030 into 2035, both on the sports side, but then across the board, we would expect that the relationships and the alignment would continue to leave lasting legacy. One specific element obviously is the venues. And we have fantastic venues in BC because of the hosting of the 2010 games. And this is an opportunity for us now, it will be 20 years following the games, to extend the legacy and to extend the use of those venues and to refresh them without having to build new, but to just extend for future generations. So a great opportunity for us to continue to be a world-leading destination with the sporting events that we all see and are used on an ongoing basis, and add to the rich experience that everyone gets when they come to the region. So a great opportunity there on the sports side, and I'll pass to Tricia.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that why these games are being proposed for this region, and it's because of that legacy of 2010. And as Andrew said, we want to extend that so it continues on. And you see other games. There's a FIFA announcement today. There's the Invictus Games. There's the potential for the North American Indigenous Games. So we start to build out this support system for these games, and will continue to come here and I think continue to build on one another and really be a healthy ecosystem for all of the industries and hosting these events.
Wonderful. Thank you all for answering that two-part question. We have a few more minutes here. We'll keep the panel here for a few more minutes for questions, but if there are any last questions from the audience, please use the Q&A function there at the bottom. BCHA, as well as TIA BC, has significant relationships with post-secondary institutions and schools, private universities. So a question here from that audience: how can post-secondary educational institutions become stakeholders in programming that will help train local students to support the people needs of this bid?
I can jump there, and anyone else can jump in behind me, but I think there's a real synergy that we could find. Number one, we're going to need a lot of workforce. So that would be a really good one, both paid and volunteer. The second one is really about education. So when we look at the opportunity, we talk truth, reconciliation, we talk about revitalizing Indigenous languages, we talk about culture right across. Tony said this is about everybody. And so really showcasing and learning about all the cultures in Canada as well. So I do think there's a really good, solid partnership that could be found.
Kwani?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah. Young people in what we're doing, and when we talk about thinking 7 generations ahead, it's so important for young people that are in post-secondary education to be a part of this. Because what I learned just in my own personal experiences in leading up to 2010 was that telling the story, but also getting out the message into various places, we need help from post-secondary school students to help with telling the story, but also learning about it while they're in school, bringing those teachings, creating that link to young people here is so important, because that's what's going to set the stage. And you heard from Trisha and others, there's so many more events that are being proposed. So like a long-term plan for hosting international and major events, some of the ideas of young people, that would be important to hear their voices, as well as, getting involved into the volunteer bases or involved in the games themselves. So I think that's part of this. And in hearing that as a question today is also important, and love to hear that, as we start to look at some of the suggestions that you may have from Hotel Association of BC as well. So thank you for bringing up that question. That's a very important part of what we're doing is the young people.
Perfect. Yeah, I know we'll have a very engaged group from our sector for sure. So we just we'll be wrapping up here in a moment. I did want to quickly address, I believe Mary brought it up, with relation to the work that Marian Harper Treskin is doing, gathering particularly hotel blocks, or starting to get that piece of the puzzle put together. You will be hearing via BCHA and also our other partners. You will be hearing from us. Each of the communities in the areas that have been outlined will be contacted in the coming weeks. So just stay tuned for that. It'll likely come through BCHA and or Marian and her group as well. But just wanted to address that as well. And that'll be every community in the Lower Mainland, Metro Vancouver, Sea to Sky, and then the Kamloops, Sun Peaks area. So we'll be addressing that. I would like to close. I'm sure this is the question that's on everybody's mind. I think Andrew will probably take it. But what do we need to do to win this thing? Who are we up against? Let's get this going. Let's make it happen. Maybe you can tell us with that and leave us on a high note here, Andrew.
I would love to jump in, and I'm sure there's a lot of voices from the team as well. But we do believe that this is an incredible opportunity. As Trisha mentioned, there's incredible support from the international community. We believe that the vision and the concept and all the pieces that are in place align to the direction of the Olympic movement, to the strategic documents that have been put forward in recent years, Agenda 2020, Agenda 2020 +5, and this is a meaningful project. And so we believe in it. We need the voices. We need support. We need for people to tell their 2010 stories, to go to gamesengagement.ca and share those with us, to share with their communities. When we did the traditional ceremony to unveil this at the Squamish Little Cultural Center in Whistler on Tuesday, we were talking about being witness to the moment, being witness to the concept, and to having the responsibility to share that and to talk about it and to share the message. And so we would ask everyone on this call to do so. We think that this is a fantastic opportunity for this community, and we would love to hear your voices talking positively about this project as we move forward and collaborating with us. And maybe I'll ask if Trisha, Twani, or anyone else would like to add on.
Just to add that, we can't sit back and just think this is going to happen without all of us speaking up for it, because that's what this engagement process is about. If you're for it, also say you're for it. If you're against it, tell us why. What would you like to see different? Right. But it's really important that those who are supportive of the games also speak up, because it's not going to happen if we don't speak up and so make your voice heard. And so go on gamesengagement.ca and express your views, pro, con, middle of the pack. Again, what you loved about 2010, what you'd like to see again, what could be different for you. But it's really important that you engage, because these games, the way the process works now, they don't happen without the support of the community, and that's right. That's the way it should be. And I think there is the support out there. We just have to hear it.
Yeah, and Mike, I just wanted to let you know that I just got a message from Indigenous Tourism BC, and they heard the call to action and they want to step up and have a letter of support for what we're doing from their organization, because of the value and the importance of what the work that they see is happening right now. So that's another way that in terms of associations, we can also hear your voice as well, because it's a one voice to many. It's going to take all of us. Osiam, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, again, grateful to this group for taking the time this week. I know it's been a busy week for you all, so thank you so much for spending time with our sector here. I know there's a lot of great interest, and there will be a lot of engagement from this group going forward. For everyone on the call today, our audience, thank you so much for attending. Once again, thanks to our sponsor, Peninsula Canada. So if you want more information on Peninsula Canada, go to peninsulacanada.com or contact BCHA and we'll get you in touch with Katrina and her team. That's it for the summer for the virtual event series. We will be taking July and August off because we know everybody in the industry is very busy, and we'll be back in September with the rest of the year's programming for the virtual event series. Thank you very much for attending today, and good luck to everyone the summer, and also to the organizing team here. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.